but the sort of like the vague setup of it is it takes place in the 2080s, and America is like collapsed into sort of like walled fascist city-states.
Far-fetched.
Yeah, never could possibly imagine this happening. And then the main character Lucius is this like sort of like uptight academic from the city, the former New York. It's like this walled Manhattan complex. And he gets hired by the mayor / CEO of New York City to go do an ethnography of a cult that's been living in the Catskill Mountains since the 1970s. And then he gets there, and strange things start to happen to him and the surroundings.
Okay, so this has a lot of cool things going on about it. When I've seen you talk about this book, I have been really interested in the way that this story came to be. Something that I think is really cool when people like work on stories, put things together. There's a lot of really interesting influences, or often there's like some really fun directions that a story takes as it's like fermenting and as it's coming to be. Can you talk a bit about why do you feel like this story is relevant now, or like how did it come to something that you wanted to tell a story about?
Yeah, so I kind of, this one, my past books I've kind of like had a very solid idea of what I wanted to do, like straight off the bat. Plot-wise, character-wise, it was sort of like, well, here's my capital I idea. And this one I kind of just like, I kind of had like this weird, the first vision, like in the book, Lucius like suffers all these like, sort of like erotic, fantastical visions. And I kind of just, that kind of like struck me all at once, that, and I said like, well, who is this guy, why is he having it, whatever, and I started digging into it, and then I started thinking about communal living, and I wanted to do something about that because I'm kind of interested in it, and I started doing a lot of research about communal living, and a good friend of mine gave me a book called Paradise Now that's all about these mid to late 18th century, or 19th century, sorry, 1800s, pre-Marxist socialist communes all over upstate New York and in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And I started reading about these communes, and I got really sort of obsessed with them. And the thing that's like relevant to now that I think is interesting is that there's so many of these around that time. And sort of, the book I was reading posited, and I sort of like took a little further, which was like, this was the invention, around this time, was like the invention of modern capitalism as you and I understand it. It's like capitalism, like money existed, but the way that capital exists did not until around then, and like the Industrial Revolution was happening, and American life started to look very different very suddenly, went from a very agrarian thing, people started moving into the cities, they started working in manufacturing. So there's just this massive upheaval of American life, and a lot of people started to think the world was ending. And I think if you are a gay person, a trans person, now you tend to know somebody or know someone who went and started a farm with their friends. It's like, yes. Knowing chuckles from the audience. But it's because I think it does feel like the world is ending, and it has for a while now. And it is trying to exert a modicum of control over like a world that is changing in a way that you feel like you can't get your hands around. And the same thing happened in the 70s, which is why, like, I was talking to a friend of mine whose parents met at a commune in the 70s, right? Like, it was a very sort of common, again, all over upstate New York, again, like in the Catskills and stuff. All these like artist communes sprung up.
Yeah, I've heard of a few of them. I think like the Oneida colony was one of them. Like it was like kind of a proto free love, unless I'm like.
Oh, it was free love for one guy.
Oh,
it was free love generally.
Sure.
But it was like this one guy will assign you your free love unit, and over time it became sort of like, and it's also all for me, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a like sentiment that is all over the place. Like you do definitely see it in like things from the 70s, but also now, I mean, that's like the TikTok fantasy, right? It's like going to have your little like subsistence farming fantasy, one way or another, and it can be distorted a lot of different ways. So I think that's like a interesting thing to see there being a legacy of that whenever there is collective anxiety about various things. So okay, so you like internalize and incorporate all this information and like help that shape the book. What were some other influences or things that like you were taking in as you kind of worked on a thing of this scale?
Yeah, so the other big influences to me in terms of like aesthetic and like mood stuff was kind of, there's two things. There's a framing device in this book that's like a museum that is you see like kids in the future of the future sort of like learning about the events of the book, and that was not ripped off but kind of inspired by one of my favorite movies is Kelly Reichardt's First Cow. You ever seen it?
Seen it.
Okay, it's really great, but like the first thing you see in that movie is the two main characters as skeletons, and it takes place in the 1800s again, and so you kind of have this feeling of like, oh, like history is going to ground these boys to dust no matter what, just like everybody in this story is dead. Like that sort of like feeling hanging over it was really fascinating to me, and I was kind of striving for that. And the other big thing is to me was Alan Moore's Swamp Thing from the 80s.
Interesting. Okay, tell me more.
Which I don't know if you've read it, but you know, like the classic conception of the Swamp Thing is in the historical literature, but the Swamp Thing, it's like a excuse me.
No worries.
It's like a guy gets turned into the Swamp Thing, and he is the Swamp Thing forever. And Alan Moore's book is like, no, this is a forest spirit who thinks he's a man, and all he wants to do is have sex with his girlfriend, and eat psychedelic yams that he grows in his armpits. And it's a really crazy book, and it's like very weirdly very sexy book, and it's got a lot of interesting psychedelic visuals. The artist was Steve Bissett, I think.
Yeah.
And I was really just loved that sort of like horny psychedelia and like plants. Yeah.
And I've also had heard you talk about, you know, this is a thing that I feel like is understated a lot in making really any kind of like non-visual media, but a lot of times there's like musical inspirations. We've had a conversation about musicals.
Yes.
Like, I know that is like a big part of your thing. Like, are there any other like perhaps less like intuitive things that inspire this as well?
Yeah, I mean the epigraph to this book is from Into the Woods.
Of course.
Or sorry, Jesus, no, I got rid of that. I had two epigraphs, and one was Into the Woods, but the one that stayed is from Pacific Overtures.
Okay, so it was
Rather.
Sondheim. Right?
It was Sondheim. He's my guy. But like the specifically, there's a song called "Someone in a Tree." That's like my favorite Sondheim song, and it's sort of about like that whole musical is about a lot of things, but it's about the U.S. like forcing Japan to open in the 1900s or 1800s. And I guess I'm a real 19th century kid.
Yeah.
I guess. But like the U.S., but the song is about there's like the treaty being signed that the U.S. is forcing Japan to sign, and there's a guy as an old man remembering that he was a little boy in a tree who could see what was happening but could not hear anything, and he's in conversation with a guy who was a guard who was under the floorboards that could hear but not see anything, and they're like. And the boy and the old man and the samurai guard are all singing to each other about how like history is this thing that we piece together and can never really have a serious hold. We can never really truly understand it. And it's like the point of the song is like it's the little pieces that make up what actually happened, not what you're told. And so much of the book is about like history is this object that's like. Who's it for? Who is it being told to? Who is it being told by? Who is this being performed for? And I'm just kind of obsessed with this idea of like the way that history is told, and again with the museum stuff. The other like big touch point for me was I worked in museums for a while, so I got really into like the production of these spaces. And one of the big inspirations for me was going to the Natural History Museum in New York, where there's all these like dioramas of historic. There's a couple of like historical events pertaining to New York City, and there's one that is the sale of Manhattan, right, from the Lenape Indians to the Dutch, and it's still there and it's inaccurate, but now it's covered in stickers. that say like, what's wrong with this picture? And it's like
Interesting.
a little pop-up video with like lines point like, this person wouldn't have had that haircut or those clothes. This person wasn't there at all. Like, this whole thing is apocryphal, or this is just not how it went down at all. But it's there because it's like, well, now that's an artifact because it's from 90 years ago.
Right,
Yeah.
it's like kind of like a artifact of the museum itself and like what it was trying to do. That's interesting. I've been at a museum in Chicago, the big museum in Chicago, I forget what it's called at the moment. They do a similar thing. The other thing that's interesting with museums too is that is a like building that is like storing artifacts but also has to deal with like massive traffic and people coming through it, like children like lick things, like there's like kind of a interfacing with stuff in a way that is like super duper interesting too.
Yeah, as a child, I was at the British Museum and I touched the Rosetta Stone.
Okay.
Which you're not supposed to do. But nobody called me. I just like was like it was right there and I just sort of like gave it a little touch. And the other thing, I guess, because we're all friends here, nobody talked about this, is I used to, when I worked in museums, I was installing lights at the Frick Museum in New York, which is, it's like in Frick's old house, and it's got an incredible collection. And I was installing some lights in their world famous enamels room, and the museum was closed, and I accidentally hit with my butt up on a ladder a 13th century triptych.
So you're like ultra cursed.
Yes, I think so. I'm just sort of like Forrest Gumping my way through museum history. Yeah.
But yeah, no one will ever tell.
No one will ever
No
tell.
one will
Yeah.
tell. This stays in this room.
That's right.
Oh my god. Oh, okay. So I'm trying to think of like where you jump off from that. Okay. So you and I have known each other for a bit. Like I feel it's probably been like a decade.
I think so. Yeah, it's been a long time.
So for like, raise your hand if you're familiar with like Mattie's work. Like, okay, so a good chunk, but like, so you have this background in short like comics and specifically, I mean, like editorial, like nonfiction, like political comics, like stuff that's short, stuff with punchlines.
Yes.
Something I'm also interested in is how you have changed or adapted your storytelling style from like this format, which like you have like a very consistent like way of doing it. You had a format and a formula that like worked and developed over time.
Yeah.
But for making a graphic novel, which I can say from experience is a long experience, like you work on it for a long time and then you don't look at the book for a year and then you have to talk about it with people. So I would love to hear, this is not your first graphic novel, but can you talk about sort of how your process as a cartoonist has changed?
Yeah, it's like, it's totally different every time, especially because every one of my graphic novels has been different pretty significantly. But yeah, I think I'm lucky that I kind of like, the first longer work I did was like a novella. It was like 60 pages long. So I kind of, that one was just a series of political cartoons that I kind of turned into a story via brute force, that I kind of like stretched into something. And then my last book, Boys Weekend, was very much like, I had a story in mind that was long, but I broke it down into like little chapters that were very sort of like digestible, like 20-page little short stories. But this book was this like completely holistic experience where the thing I keep talking about is the best writing advice I've ever seen in my entire life was an old tweet by my friend Gretchen Falker Martin. Okay. That is just like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, how do you write a book? First, think of a gay little man. Now give him a problem.
Wait, she came up with
That's
that?
hers, yeah.
I've heard that give that gay little man a problem thing quoted so many times.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's the best writing advice anyone can ever give. It accurately describes like so many great books. I mean, to me, I'm always like, what's The Hobbit? The gayest little man of all time, in both ways. But like, but this time around, I was trying something really new where I kind of had my gay little man, and then I just threw problems at him until I had a story. So it's been it's that dumb thing where I'm not the first person to say it, but it is true that you kind of have to learn how to write every book. That like it's like starting from scratch every single time, it feels like. And then this time, also it was just like, I think for me anyways, the sort of short form work, it never leaves my DNA.
No.
It's like, I think in terms of like page spreads, pretty pretty thoroughly still, and I try to put, there's still like, it feels like something's ended every time I turn the page, or I try to, and I think it's really helped my sense of pacing to keep it consistent. And then there's things like this book, I was reading it again for the first time the other day in like, probably a year. And I was like, oh, there's like jokes in here, it's funny.
Yeah.
But I wasn't trying to make jokes.
No, it's like, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like the stuff in the background, like, right? Like the background jokes.
Yeah, there's like stuff in the background, there's like people's expressions, there's like little motions, the way people run around, like there's just sort of, there are jokes in the way that it is made that were not, I was like, this is me making like my big serious book, and I'm like, oh, this is funny actually. So it kind of works out, I think. So it's
Yeah. Something I think I've noticed, carry on from your work, when you did like 4-panel comics where you only have so much space, like you make those images dense. Like you have stuff going on in the background. Like something that I noticed because I reread Boys Weekend recently too. Like you love having jokes be like nightmarish ads that are in people's phones and backgrounds of all time. There's a part, there's this thing early on in Simplicity where Lucius is looking at his phone, where he's just like, I don't know, taking notes or he's taking a call or something, but there's like nightmarish pop-up ads, and there's one saying, you are going bald in 4 years, 7 months. And I was like, it's like one of those things that got a big laugh out of me.
Yeah, that's an ad for a razor, if I recall correctly, for like a head razor. It's like, you're going bald anyways, man. You might as well buy the head razor. So yeah, and that's just sort of, to me, this is, to me, like a work of speculative fiction, right? And I'm trying to sort of create a sense of unreality, and to me, like I'm such like a Verhoeven
Oh, we could talk about Verhoeven for
yeah, and like I mean like the one-to-ones at the ads in RoboCop that I think are such an incredible way of like inoculating you to how wacky the world is, that feels kind of real, where you see an ad for something and you're like, okay, this is just like how things are. So I'm just really obsessed with like that kind of stuff. It's like Verhoeven and Futurama probably are the two big touch points for me.
Doesn't Lucius have those kind of like arm
He's got a couple.
thingies
Futurama? He's got a couple of the Futurama arm sleeves.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. Like I've been trying to get more interested in Verhoeven movies recently. And recently I watched like a YouTube video where so Paul Verhoeven, he did RoboCop, he also does a lot of like sexual thrillers, like that is his oeuvre, and somebody like supercut that giant like robot like machine gun scene in RoboCop with like the pool scene in Showgirls. And it's just like pure maximalist like blood and boobs and violence and like and just maximalist, and I think that's super interesting. Like, because that's something I think I see as a through line in your stuff too. Like in this, like there's very like erotic stuff happening in here, and just like nightmarish creatures like tearing people in half or whatever. But like I've seen that in your other work as well. Like, what is your draw to nightmarish creatures?
It's kind of just fun to draw for me. I mean, that's also a thing that grew out of me doing political work. Actually, was I am not a gifted caricaturist. I don't like drawing caricatures of politicians. Like, it was never interesting to me when I was like, for like 10 years, I was, an editor at and a contributor to like a political cartoon site. And I do a lot of love for political comics, but I don't like single panel political cartoons, and it wasn't interesting to me to draw them. They're really hard to make good, which is why there's so few of them that are good.
We can't all be that guy from The Onion, Kelly.
We all can't be Kelly. I mean, the guy who is Kelly did some work for the Nib.
Oh, I forgot about
It's
that.
it's Ward's son. Yeah. Who like does like straight political work, which is so funny to me that he does that and then goes and does Kelly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just like not interested in like drawing a comic that was like, and did you see what the president said this week? Because like we all saw at this point, like it made like there was, I think, a time where you did have to say, do you see what the president said this week?
Right.
But that time is gone.
Yeah.
So for me, it was sort of like, well, how do I zoom out to a bigger structural issue and talk about that instead of, the wacky thing that happened in politics that we're all making fun of that week. So I tried to talk about structural issues, and the way I was doing that is I just started making 4-panel political comics that were like a small genre story. And and that's when I started drawing all the monsters and the goo and the fire and the people dying and stuff. And then I was like, well, this is fun. I like drawing it. And then it just sort of stuck.
Yeah, there's a handful of like really cool like goopy multi-eyeball monsters in here that are a lot of fun, and like everything is like representative of something else, and there's just like a lot of interesting things going on there. Sorry, you look like you were gonna say something.
Oh no.
Okay. Well.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's talk about trans stories.
Sis.
This is something that I would love to talk about too, because this is a very, very trans story.
Yeah.
Like main character is trans. A lot of the like side characters are trans. Like it's like unavoidable to talk about this book and not talk about like trans narratives, and that's something that is like, that is also a through line through your work in a way that I think is interesting, because it is like, I'm saying this because like I'm the same kind of way. Like it has irreversibly changed the course, like the narrative course of like what you write and what you do. Speak on that.
Sure.
Yeah, however you want to take that.
Yeah, I mean, he was always trans when I was writing him. Like, he came to me, he was like, here's this little trans guy, and that's the way in which he's gay. But it was just more interesting to write about, I think. But it's just sort of where my attention is. But I think what it does is, like, this book, so much of his sort of struggle in the book and the conflict is this, like, severe sense of alienation he has from the world and his own body. Like, there's so much of this, like, where he's uptight sexually in a way that I think would be very familiar to to a lot of trans people. That is, like, something we all kind of have to get over. And, most of us do well, but, like, but it is something you have to, like, sort of reckon with, and this is a person that hasn't done that yet. And it does, I think, make this profound sense of alienation to the world, where you have sort of like, to me, Lucius is this interesting character because he's not glimpsed or bothered to see the structures under which he lives. But there's this other structure that he saw outside of and glimpsed the superstructure, like he saw the matrix on gender, but didn't on like how society functions.
Right.
And I think that's just such an interesting thing that can happen sometimes, but it's like, I just find it gives you a sort of way of looking at, I think, being trans sort of forces you to look at society in a way that is sort of like, it starts to make you question everything. Like, if this one thing that I was told forever was like so severely wrong, like what else is there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did a lot of like deliberate choices that I really appreciate with Lucius, like down to his design. Like, you gave him like a dump truck, which I really appreciate. And I feel like that's one of those things, like that is something that like you can be super self-conscious about. Like the thing about like, oh god, I'm really bald, like that is a thing that like I think gets internalized as well. But there is like this like external pressure that like manifests in like all kinds of ways in this book. Like going through all of these like nightmarish like security like protocols and like getting like your blood drawn before you go talk to your boss, and like he keeps like making the machine that like checks his identity go haywire. There's like all of this like build up and like garbage that gets in the way that is super duper interesting. But even when he is not interfacing with that every day, like the kind of person that he is so not prepared to be in a community of people who like that is not part of their lives and not part of their beings. I find very, very interesting. He is not equipped for it.
Yeah, and I think we haven't talked too much about the community that he goes
let's do that.
Yeah, and they are really inspired by two of those groups from the 1800s that I was talking about before. One of which is the followers of a French guy called Etienne Cabet, who had all these followers in France in the 1860s and 70s it was mostly like working class artisans he wrote this book called Travels in Icaria, where he just sort of had his little blurbo, and he said like, well, here's a utopia I thought of. This is what society would be if it was perfect. And he's got this guy who's doing a little travelogue writing about this. I tried to read it. It's like so boring, but because it's so didactic and just sort of like, this is how I think society should be. But he got really, really popular. People started writing anthems of Icaria. They came up with a uniform. It'd be the sort of thing
Like fan fiction, like other people that were not him?
Yeah, like
That's
he
awesome.
he got this huge movement of followers, and they like would wear black velvet capes. But you'd like go to your cobbler, and he'd be like, "Do you want to learn about Icaria?" Yeah, it was crazy. But a bunch of them tried to do it. They tried to build it in America a couple of times, in like Texas and Louisiana, one time in Nauvoo, Illinois, which is the town that Mormons built.
Oh, okay.
After they'd left, the Carians showed up and tried to do it, and like it obviously didn't work, right? Because we don't, and I'm quoting here, we don't have our garbage taken away by dogs of remarkable size and strength. Which is the last thought I'll ever think in my life is that sentence. After reading this book. But, so like I was really thinking about them, like the book, the group is really influenced by them, sort of like surface level, like they read a book by a guy in the 70s and they tried to like form a commune, kind of recreating his perfect society. And the other big one was the Shakers.
Okay, yes.
Which, like, we all know the one thing about the Shakers, right? Like, they don't have sex. They didn't have sex. And, but they were this, like, remarkably stable society during this time where there was, like, all this massive upheaval. And they, you know, outside of that one big problem, they kind of had a lot of it figured out pretty well. And the other thing they would do is, like, as a form of, like, social cohesion, since there wasn't, like, physical intimacy between people, is they were the shaking Quakers, right? So at church every week, it would be at night, and they would get naked and they'd run around in the woods screaming. Like, they really, and it was just like, because they had to like have some release. So in the book, I'm sort of like, well, what if the Shakers had sex? Like, I think they would have worked out.
I mean, I feel like that's underselling it. Like, what you draw is like a Purge-esque orgy.
Yeah, like every night, they have what they call the mutual right, and it's like they get in a fight that is also an orgy. I cannot overstate how much they had to find. The first printer they went to print this book would not print it. And I'm not exaggerating.
I believe that.
Yeah, and but like, I calculated there's a human butt every 8.5 pages in this book on average. Because that's what they cited was the butts for some reason. I don't know.
The butts, okay.
Which is funny because there's a lot of genitals.
There's a lot of like just tackle like flying around.
Yeah. But like, yeah, there's also a lot of tackling. So this society that is in the book, like every night getting nude and having a fist fight that is also an orgy is like so outside of like his conception of what his comfortable life looks like, despite also like having to go through this massive sense of like self-liberation for himself. And I just found that fiction really interesting to write about.
Yeah, there's a quote that I wanted to grab that I'll say aloud, and I would love to hear what you think of it. Every way you set up society, this is like about the concept of like creating a utopian society, right? Every way you set up society, you have problems. What unsolvable problems do you want to have?
Yeah.
Did you say that, or was that like something somebody said?
That sounds like a thing I said.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm paraphrasing anybody. I think that sounds like a thing that I've said before in an interview, and that was me kind of paraphrasing, to me, the meaning of a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin's work, is my favorite author probably. And that was me specifically thinking about the book The Dispossessed, which is maybe my favorite book, which is like about an anarchist society that's essentially on the moon, and like a guy comes back to Earth, and the whole book is like, bitch, you live like this, like observing capitalism for the first time. And I really love that book, but so much of it is like the anarchist society that it comes from, despite Le Guin being a committed anarchist, isn't perfect, and it has issues. And I just think that's so important to sort of keep in mind when you're talking about, I am going to use, I don't know what art's place in the revolution is, or what, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But I do know that it is my job as someone with imagination to show that the world can be a lot of different ways. And to me, it's sort of something I'm always trying to impart, which is everything's gonna have an issue, but what issues do you want to? The unsolvable problem could either be we throw too many people in jail forever, or it's I'm kind of unclear on who owns this towel, right? And those are both unsolvable problems, right? And I think it's pretty clear the towel one is a little preferable.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so. By
Yeah.
the way, there are copies of The Dispossessed on the back shelf. I did see them like 20 minutes ago.
Great
So.
book, perfect book.
Yeah, I would stand for Le Guin forever. I literally have a Le Guin tattoo. So yeah, it's for Left Hand of Darkness,
shit.
which is the book that trans my
Right,
gender.
that was that was my other. I don't want to like go like when you're like, what are your inspirations? I don't want to just name a bunch of Le Guin books, but
Yeah.
the other one is Left Hand of Darkness.
Mhm.
With regards to like intimacy's place in social change,
Mhm.
and like all the sex in this book is like, yeah, you don't have to be having sex in the revolution or whatever, but you do need like intimacy on some level with
Yeah.
your comrades, and in this book it looks like sex,
Yeah.
but yeah.
And otherwise, like, those impulses can get like subverted or like put into other ways that are maybe not as constructive. And like, I don't know, I think that's really like, we haven't even gotten to the fact that these are not like the Spiritual Association appears. It's not the only post-apocalyptic group such as it is. Like there are like other people who are like coping in various ways, and there's lots of like really interesting, just psychological stuff going on there. But I don't know. Le Guin is also a path we could go down forever. I feel like it comes up so much in like our section of like online comics world.
Yeah.
I keep meaning to make like a gif of like, like in Pee-wee's Playhouse, whenever the secret word is said and everyone screams really loud. Like I want like Ursula Le Guin to be flashing on the screen so everyone can scream about her for a bit. Like everyone seems to like her stuff.
I just think she's so important, and also like as someone who writes fiction about politics, I just find her very inspirational because she writes about it in a way that's so kind and human and like not judgmental of anyone, but it's so forceful and it's like moral center, but in a way that is never preachy and is never didactic in the work, and it's something I'm always really aspiring to.
Totally. Let me see. There was one other. Oh yeah, I want to make sure I touch on this. I have influences that you cited, and there's an album I want to make sure that we touch on. Mort Garson's Plantasia.
That's right, baby.
Who, raise your hand if you're familiar with Mort Garson's Plantasia. Can you talk a bit about this album that I
Wait, what?
So Mort Garson's Plantasia it's from I think from the 70s.
Oh, it absolutely.
I mean, it's not from the 70s. Someone's doing an incredible job aping the 70s, but it is an album that the synth artist wrote, and it is for plants to listen to. It's synth music for plants.
Yeah. It's very it's noodly. It's like very dreamlike. It's so whimsical.
I was listening the sort of like my writing when I'm writing, just like writing scripts. I kind of think of a couple of albums for different moods for different parts of the book, and I'll just listen to them on loop while I'm writing that stuff. And I had that on when I was doing a lot of the sort of day-to-day life of the Spiritual Association. It was like time to put on Plantasia and listen to that. And then when it was like weird, dark, like erotic stuff, I was listening to a lot of the album Dope Smoker by Sleep. Which is it's a stoner rock album. It is one 45-minute long song.
God. Yeah, they would have that.
And it sounds like the guys in Dune singing, like the weird like throat singing.
They're like, let me think. Is there anything we have not yet talked about with Simplicity that we want to touch on before we open it to audience questions?
No, it was really thorough. Nothing I can think of.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I love talking about all the things that we talk about. I feel like anything that goes between like Le Guin and Paul Verhoeven is like a conversation well spent. Yeah. Well, in that case, why don't we open it up to questions? Does anyone have one for Mattie about like the book, about her work as a whole? Anything that you want to hear more about? Yes. Stranger in the front who I don't know.
Yeah, no, who are you? I was interested to hear that Simplicity is about essentially a cult, when like also Boys Weekend, like cult stuff was like such a big thing, and I'm curious, like, was that like, did you finish Boys Weekend and you were like, I haven't thought enough about cults?
You know, it's really funny. So Boys Weekend is, if you haven't read it or don't know it, it's like it's semi-autobiographical about like a trans feminine person going on a bachelor party weekend with their college friends, and then like horrible stuff starts happening, and there is a cult in it, and that book. Well, I finished this book and I handed it in, and then I literally had the thought, oh, this is about a person going somewhere and encountering a cult, and Boys Weekend is about a person going somewhere and encountering a cult. I was like, shit. But I think when I was oh no about it, I was sort of like, well, they're very different books in so many ways that if you're describing them that way, you're sort of missing the forest from the trees a little bit. But it's what is interesting to me, I think, from both senses, is the cult in Boys Weekend is like very representative of like a mode of thinking, right? It is about like the dominant mode of like cis hetero sort of patriarchal society, which is a cool sentence to say, and I love to say it. But in this book, the cult is like less metaphorical, right? It is like just a group of people that are communally living, and I think I'm just interested in both books in different directions. Is like what radicalizes a person and why, and what is appealing about that. In a way, like in Boys Weekend, I'm like, I would say that book is very judgmental about the cult because they're evil and bad, and like that's a book playing with like horror tropes, and it's very like these people are bad.
For context, like the bachelor party takes place in like a bizarro version of Las Vegas, and who are the worst people you can run into in Las Vegas? A conference of tech bros. Like that's like that's like the cult that we're talking about. So like it is a very different kind of like dealing with thinking like in a world
like
at
a
large.
like a groupie thing. Whereas this book, so much of the stuff about these these communal living groups that would go start a commune somewhere, so much of their thinking was like, well, we're going to go off and we're going to start our little farm or our little town or whatever it is, and everybody's going to see how cool our town is. And they're going to be back at home and they'll be like, wow, our town should be like that. And then that's how the ideas are going to propagate, which I think kind of fundamentally misunderstands how power functions and is propagated and how change occurs. Like you change things by, I don't know, burning the police station down. Like,
right. Because there's
I'm saying not that much, but like you have to keep burning police stations. That's what I'm saying. So I started this book very much like, oh, you need to like, I was very judgmental of the SAP as they're called in the book, like, but by the time I was done writing, I was kind of like, I actually get the impulse, like, I have a better understanding of it. I kind of like fell in love with the weird little perverts that I made in a way that I normally don't get too invested in my own characters like that. And yeah, I think I'm just very interested in like what causes a person to like join up for good or for ill.
Yeah. There, if I'm remembering right, there are elements of the like spiritual association of peers that like, let's say would not be popular. They would be a hard sell. Like if I'm remembering right, like they don't really believe in pets.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell.
Yeah.
Like if you're propagating that through society.
Yeah, they're all vegetarian.
Yeah.
They have free love every night. Like there's no, there's like a weird undefined religion that there are clerics of that are kind of in charge of everybody.
Right.
And it's like, what's the religion? They're kind of like, who cares, man?
Yeah, whereas with like Boys Weekend, like you have to wear like a terrible polo, but you also have to make a lot of money. So like, that kind of like shows like the fundamental imbalance of like what makes something propagate, right? Like what makes it viral.
Yeah.
Did we answer your question? Any final thoughts on that before we ask Grant for another? Who else has a question? Yes, Wanda in the back.
Yeah. In the simplicity world, I'm kind of curious about like Lucius goes and he meets with the SAP, and there's some talk in like the interviews about gender and him having like kind of a more locked down, less fluid sense of his own gender and transness, and he's sort of protesting about that. And just got me kind of curious, I guess, with your imagined future, like not too far off, 40, 50, 60 years from now, were you imagining the New York City that he lives in as like being significantly like culturally, gender, sexually different like than the present?
Yeah, so I think, it's a very conservative society that he lives in the city. Like it is essentially fascist. It is a surveillance state. People are in it. They're sort of like accepting enough of queerness. There's a gay bar in it, and there's like visibly queer people around in the city, and as much as we're always just kind of around in the city, but it is sort of, it is a future in which people are controlled pretty significantly. So it is sort of, again, like this thing that he probably had to fight for pretty hard in my mind, and the way that the SAP sees gender and sexuality in the book is very, to me, like 1970s. Like it's sort of like our conception of like what a trans person is now is very different than it was 20 years ago, different than it was 20 years before that. It'll be different in 20 years from now. Like the idea of like just someone being like, I don't know, the idea that there was this sort of like, if you wanted to be a trans person, you were, say you were a trans person, you were a man, and then you would get bottom surgery, and the next day you're a woman. And that's how they saw it, even trans people. And it was really illuminating. Actually, I watched while I was making this, there's a documentary called Let Me Die.
Let Me Die, Woman, Doris Wishman, yeah.
And it's just like a really interesting document about how trans is functioned at the time. And I was just really fascinated by that. So like this group that left the world in the 70s, they'd still be locked into that on some level, and it would develop from there without external input. So I was just trying to sort of like draw that line best I could. Yeah.
That's an interesting thought exercise.
Yeah.
Just like what from that starting point would go to. Yeah, how about you over there?
As an aside, the way that gay culture is seen in Japan is a lot like it is here in it was here in the 70s, where there's like, public figures who are like this, but people are like, oh, that doesn't happen in real life, because they don't live in a city or whatever.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask, because I came in late, did you guys talk about the Oneida Sex Cult at all?
A little bit. Yeah.
But I always find that really interesting because like it still existed for many, many years after the sex cult part stopped, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Didn't they like make spoons?
They made
And, like,
spoons.
okay, I couldn't remember if I hallucinated that.
They made a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they were still making it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Not
It's,
anymore, though.
yeah. It's the kind of thing where if you go off and live, and you're doing subsistence farming, you do kind of have to start making stuff.
Right.
The Shakers made incredible brooms. The brooms are great. The chairs are great.
Okay, chairs I've heard of. Brooms though.
Yeah, they made really nice brooms.
I can always use a broom.
Yeah, and they always like hooked on the wall like the chairs.
Oh, okay. I gotta look for this. These spoons and brooms.
Spoons and brooms.
Thank you, person I don't know. Also, a lot of familiar faces here. Okay, in the back. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's like a particular flavor of failed utopians that you grew up around, or like came of age around, or are very fond of.
Oh, so failed utopians I came of age around. Not really. No, but it's like we're surrounded by it, right? Like America for one. Failed utopia in a lot of ways. Like I think a thing we didn't talk about too much is like the setting of the book. It's like in the Catskills, and it's in an abandoned summer camp. But I think I was just thinking about a thing I'm always thinking about is how like America's kind of haunted, right? Like we live, the land is soaked in blood, and the idea that you could like have a terra nullius somewhere in America would like that idea still persists to people. I think they just go somewhere and no one's ever been there before. So like there is this sort of, I went to, I don't know, it's in an abandoned summer camp. The summer camp is kind of based on my memories of an old arts camp I went to, and the arts camp was living in the bones of a former like socialist work farm from the 30s, and so it's like just various generations of hippies taking over and doing different things with the same land. So I think that was sort of like inspirational to me, but I was never around the cult too much as a child. No.
I don't think I grew up with any either. Like I grew up in California, so like other
I was
songs,
gonna say.
and you hear about them. Like
Mhm.
I know someone who lives in Petaluma, or like to talk about Petaluma, like a bunch of like Stalinist like farming colonies there for a hot
Yeah.
minute, and like I don't know, there's like always people talking about it, Joshua Tree or whatever, but like I didn't like. I don't know. I feel like we're kind of in the wrong era. We grew up in the wrong era
I know
for
we
like
missed all the
peak
cool
cults.
cults. Maybe soon.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you can go if anyone wants to start one later. Come talk to me. Some of those in California, some of those Icarians I was talking about, the French people. Some of them ended up in Northern California started making wine after their various failures.
Mhm.
So there's like some like Sonoma wine that's like the generations down of like these like French maniacs.
That sounds fun. I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to do like a bootleg like Napa Valley tour based on Le Guin's book Always Coming Home.
Oh,
so
yeah.
like, what if we just went for some like cult wine?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for finding me out. I work in Mexico last weekend. That resonated with me. I was wondering, it just occurred to me, I was curious how you name your characters, because usually trans guys have the same names as like Dickens characters. And then I was also curious, like in the acknowledgements you wrote that as like one of the most difficult book projects you've had so far, and I was like curious, like if there's anything in particular that's like all disparate threads trying to put together.
Yeah, naming Lucius was tough. I just sort of like made a big list of like trans guy names that were not funny to say. There's a lot that are just a little too stereotypical. Sorry?
I feel personally offended by
That's, I mean, you should.
I forget the source of the tweet, but one I always think about is like trans women often name themselves like they're 25th century jewelry thieves, and trans men name themselves like they're drowned Victorian children.
That's exactly true. There's an unrealized project that me and my friend Calvin have where there is a trans woman named Truck in it.
Yes!
Her name is just Truck. I always, both he and the main character in Boys Weekend just have names that are just Yiddish words for things. Lucius's last name is just the Yiddish word for parsnip, because it's the most boring vegetable I can think of. It was a tough project because there's just so much in it that, like, Boys Weekend was this thing that happened. I mean, not all of it, obviously. Not the part where everyone dies screaming, but like a lot of the stuff in it was like based around. I had this idea of what the story was and where it went, and what I want to say. It only really has one or two ideas in it, and the ideas are about like how friendship should function as an adult or can function, and the other idea in that one is like trans people are human beings. You know, shocker. But this book has like 20 ideas in it, and I spent the better part of a year just like every time I had a sentence that felt like book to me, I would like write it down. And then after I had that for a long time, I just had to go read it all, and I was like, well, this isn't anything. It all felt of a kind with each other in a way that I couldn't parse. And my brain was just doing a lot of background radiation work on it, and I kind of did like the old method where like if you're a writer and you have writer's block, you go take a shower, go take a walk, whatever. I basically did that forever until I just let it kind of generate something, and it was just a complicated process. I rewrote it so many times. Like the big outline of the book, I changed the ending a bunch of times. There was a lot of stuff that came late to it. It was just like really kind of torturous to write it in a way that I never experienced, which felt great at the end when I was done, but because I'm really happy with how it turned out. But it was just a different kind of experience writing for me.
Just a real quick time check. Are we okay for a couple more questions, Annie?
Yeah, 2 more.
Great. All right, go ahead.
So Plantasia has a lot of very distinct transitions between songs. Are there any that really like stand out in your memory of listening to the album? And whether or not that's the case, does that apply to your work at all?
Ooh, you know what? It's funny. I listen to that album basically only when I'm writing, so I can't even tell you the names of the tracks. It's just like one long song to me that I just listen to when I'm writing. So it's just sort of like, the transitions are incredible because they're just sort of like, it really does get you there. And I kind of feel like I work a different way where it's like I was thinking of stuff in this book in like very distinct little chunklets, and I have these chapter transitions that are very like, and now we're talking about something else. Not to like blank your question completely, but it's just very. I tried.
Perfect answer. We're going from spider plants to baby's tears.
Yeah,
Babies.
tears. Yeah, it's a plant.
Oh, what is
Yeah.
it? I'll have to look
Third track, baby.
All right, I'll have to look it up later. Okay, we got any other questions from the, yes, in the hat?
Did you do any research for this, or is it kind of based on things that you were mostly interested in? You talked a little bit about your inspirations earlier, but I wonder if there was like a research period about any of these.
Yeah, it was the stuff with those 19th century communes. I read a bunch of books about them. Yeah, the biggest inspiration was this with Paradise Now, probably. That had a story about it was one about the Oneidas, the Shakers, the Cabellas. There's this Welsh industrialist called Owen Fourier who tried to make these things called phalanxes, which were like these perfectly replicatable towns. They were like,
That's never gone wrong, ever.
no, not at all. But it was like a company town, but for like, because he was an industrialist in England, but he tried to be like, here's the industrial town for like communism, which is very interesting. And he was like, oh, there are 1,048 kinds of people. And what we do is we get one man and one woman of each kind, and then we start a town with that, and we do that for all the towns until we fix society.
This dude was born too early to absolutely punish a SimCity 3000.
Yeah. One of the thing that I'm like permanently stuck on. This is kind of stupid, but it's just in there forever in my brain. Is that one of the kinds of people that he wrote about, which he described himself as, was straight men who have love and admiration and respect for lesbians. And I was like, Owen, let's talk.
Okay, I gotta write this guy's name.
Yeah.
I have to learn everything.
About the phalanxes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I missing any other questions from the crowd I want to take? Going once, going twice. Go for it.
I'm very curious. You mentioned like Yiddish, and I'm interested in like what kind of thoughts were you having about like how, I mean, like Yiddish is so specific to like the shtetl, which is like also a community outside of a fascist government, and like what kind of thought process was happening when you were like kind of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just sort of like that's my people. You know, we are like, diaspora Jews. My family. The second half of Fiddler on the Roof happened to us, basically like the same time and place. And that's just sort of like my connection to it is through like Yiddishkeit stuff. Like it's not, I don't feel a ton of connection to a religion. I certainly don't feel connection to any countries calling themselves Jewish at the moment. Like this stuff is all really important to me, and like, I mean, to the point where, Yiddish was one of the first things they ever did in Israel was ban Yiddish theater. Because it is the language of like the weak diaspora, but I think it's such a beautiful language, and it's just important to me in terms of like, if we're talking about like the history of like radicalism in America, like the thing that I come back to that keeps me sort of like from going insane about my own identity there is like the Bund, yeah. So I'm just always, that's just what's interesting to me about it.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we will pivot to the book signing component of the evening. Thank you so much for listening.